Chapter 1. Never labelled as a prodigious child, Bloom existed in the realm of painful averageness. She blended seamlessly into the plain backdrop of her small town, where nothing of note ever happened, and no one expected otherwise. School was a series of decent grades and unnoticed efforts, a place where her presence was as easily overlooked as the tick of the classroom clock. Her one brush with visibility was understudying Annie in 6th grade, chosen not for her talents, of course, but because of her unruly and vibrant red hair. It was the final week of March in Bloom's senior year. Classes were beginning to draw to an end. History was the last of the day. Mr. Olsen, their teacher, stood at the front of the room, twirling his glasses between his fingers. He was somewhat of an eccentric man, and was in the middle of a lesson about Greek philosophy. In a single day and night of misfortune, Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea, Mr. Olsen recited, his voice carrying the weight of the ancient tale. And perhaps it is there where it has become one of the most influential cities of our time, even more so than if it never sank at all. Bloom sat tense, confidence on her smile, an orchestrated facade. She ran her fingers through her hair, anticipating a question. Now, can anyone tell me which philosopher mentioned Atlantis, and what was the significance of his account? Mr. Olsen's eyes scanned the room, landing on each student before settling on Bloom. Bloom took a deep breath, her mind racing through the material she had pored over. Plato, she began, her voice steady. He wrote about Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. The story served as an allegory for the hubris of nations and the moral lessons about power and corruption. A little precocious on her part, she thought, but she was desperate to prove that she knew the material. Mr. Olsen nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. Exactly. Plato's work isn't only historical, it's philosophical. It's about the ideas and warnings embedded within the narrative. And what about Aristotle? What was his take on Atlantis? Bloom's hand tightened around her hair. Aristotle was more skeptical. He considered the tale of Atlantis a fictional story, used by Plato to illustrate his philosophy. Correct again, Mr. Olsen said, his smile broadening. Aristotle's skepticism highlights the debate about the balance between myth and reality in philosophical teachings. Do raise your hand next time, won't you? Mr. Olsen, spoke a shrill voice from the other side of the room. How is any of this relevant to history? Atlantis wasn't real, and Plato was a philosopher, not a historian. The girl who spoke up had a name, Mitzi. And how comes Bloom gets to interrupt during class? She sat with both legs crossed to the side of her desk, a feigned shrug of cordiality on her shoulders. Not to be rude or anything, I'm just wondering. Mr. Olsen turned to Mitzi, still smiling. Well, Mitzi, I do apologise. I must confess that I thought it would be a fun change of pace, and no harm done with a spontaneous answer. Since we are on the topic though, what do you think about the influence of Socrates on Plato and Aristotle? Mitzi blinked, clearly caught off guard. Socrates. He was like their teacher or something, right? He asked a lot of questions or whatever. Indeed, Mr. Olsen said. Socrates laid the groundwork for both Plato's idealism and Aristotle's empiricism. His method of inquiry, the Socratic method, is foundational to Western philosophy. Important history, wouldn't you say so, Miss Jennings? Mitzi huffed, as Mr. Olsen continued. Bloom sighed in relief, thankful she remembered the material. History was one of Bloom's favourite classes, but that made it all the more important she did well. Although it's true she was often more interested in the gaps of the narrative rather than the history itself. Mr. Olsen was one of her favourite teachers. He was a kind man, generous and well-read, with curly black hair, dark skin, and large round glasses. He frequented a suit and was always dressed in colour, never black or grey. Today he sported mauve, almost like a glass of light wine, with a smart white shirt and a perfectly knotted forest green tie. It certainly topped Bloom's bell-bottom jeans and comfortable burgundy hoodie that she hadn't washed in weeks. As another student was about to launch into one of his verbose critiques of Aristotle's philosophy, the final bell of the day chimed. All right, we resume next week. Have a great weekend, everyone. The students grabbed their things and left. Well, everyone besides Bloom. Unaware of the time, she had half of her backpack littered over her desk. 3 highlighted printouts of Plato's writing, an ancient Greek textbook, several pages of scribbles even she had a hard time making out, and a half-drawn picture of a salamander. You did well today, said Mr. Olson, casting his eye over her desk. I've been trying to catch up on reading, and fortune favours the prepared, as they say. Fortune favours the brave, Bloom. Or was the original translated to fortune favours the bold? And you're definitely bold. Anyway, your improvement has been impressive this year. You should know your efforts haven't gone unnoticed, he said through a smile. Bloom began packing away her things, ensuring her drawing didn't crease. The rest she scrunched behind a notebook. Your essays are getting better, but they could be even stronger. I'd be happy to go through things with you next week. That would be great, thanks. Great. You have a good evening, and rest. You deserve it. Bloom smiled and left the classroom. In the hallway, a buzz was about the school, as everyone had begun to receive their college acceptance offers. She knew one girl in her history class was accepted to Stanford, and news was circling that Penelope Rhode had managed to get into NYU. Over the past year, Bloom had poured herself into her studies, driven by a desperate need to escape her life of fervent mediocrity. Had her efforts paid off? Well, yes and no. Her grades were much better, and she had already received several college offers. However, they were from modest regional universities, not prestigious institutions. These were what she applied for, after all. Bloom was waiting on one last decision, from UCLA, the university at the top of her list. She tried to temper her expectations, but as the days passed, her longing intensified. She yearned for one moment to prove to herself that she could achieve something extraordinary when she put her mind to it. The answer would arrive any day now. Bloom reorganized her locker and headed into the warm afternoon sun. Her school was quite lovely, quintessential Americana, one could say. The chatter of excited students faded as she walked away from the school grounds, her thoughts consumed by the impending arrival of the decision to her inbox. Bloom couldn't be labelled a misfit by any means. In fact, she fit in quite nicely, too well, one could say. She didn't have many friends, but this made her days relatively stress-free. It made for an easy schooling experience as nobody gave her grief. Well, nobody apart from... Hey Bloom, shouldn't you be taking that crusty old relic to the junk pile? A shrill voice spoke. Mitzi! There's nothing wrong with this bike, my dad got it for me. Oh, you poor girl, Mitzi said, twirling her onyx hair around her finger. Mitzi was an old acquaintance of Bloom's, although acquaintance would be a very strong word. She had porcelain pale skin and always wore the same pair of triangular false glasses. They had lived in the same neighbourhood for as long as Bloom could remember, and in all that time, Mitzi had done everything in her power to make Bloom's life miserable. Like when she decided to glaze Bloom's 8th birthday cake with ketchup. Mr. Olson should really stop teaching us such nonsense and start going over some real history. Don't you agree? No, I'm enjoying what we're doing right now. Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot. You live in your own fantasy world. Greek mythology must be right up your street. So, what will you be doing next year? I'll be studying fashion in New York. I'm going to be the next big thing. I can feel it. Mitzi seemed to grip the air, a self-confident grin stretching to both ears on her face. The sooner she left, the better. That's great news, Bloom uttered behind a feigned grin, ignoring most of what she had said. I'm not quite sure where I'm going yet. I'm still waiting on UCLA. I see. Well, it is a public school, so you might have a chance, you know. Thank you, I think. If I don't get in, I might take a year out to work in the shop. I see. Well, I guess we can't all have a natural gift. I guess not, Bloom trailed off, feeling a familiar knot of insecurity tightening in her stomach. Mitzi leaned in closer, a smirk playing on her lips. You know, Bloom, I heard UCLA is quite competitive these days. Maybe you should have a backup plan. I don't know of anywhere looking for an ancient Greek enthusiast, but if I see anywhere, I'll let you know. Bloom forced a smile. I appreciate your concern, Mitzi, but I'll be fine. Sure, if you say so, Mitzi leered. Anyway, I've got to run. Busy schedule and all that. Keep me updated, won't you? She flipped her hair and sauntered off, leaving Bloom aggravated, but it was nothing she hadn't dealt with before. Oh, and by the way, Bloom, Mitzi called back, halting mid-stride. I heard your mum's business hasn't been doing too great lately. Such a shame. Bloom stiffened. Gardenia's doing fine. Great, even. Thanks for asking, she said between gritted teeth. Oh, I'm sure it is, Mitzi replied with a mocking sweetness. It must be hard, though, financial strain and all that. Bloom clenched her fists. We manage. Mitzi shrugged, a fake pout on her lips. I'm just concerned for you, Bloom. Hey, if UCLA doesn't work out, you could consider a career in the floral industry. It's not like you have many other options, right? Bloom's heart pounded in her chest. She knew Mitzi was trying to get under her skin. I have plenty of options, more than you know. Oh, really? Mitzi's voice dripped with sarcasm. Like what? Bloom steadied her nerves. Like focusing on my art. I've been working on a portfolio. Mitzi raised an eyebrow. Art? How, cute. Sad, but cute. Let's be real for a second though, Bloom. It's a tough field. Not everyone can make it. Look at me, for instance. You have to be top of your game to make it where I'm going. Just because it's tough doesn't mean it's impossible. Mitzi smirked. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure your paintings of flowers and Socrates, was it, will hit it big. With that, Mitzi finally climbed into her car and drove away. Bloom sighed and glanced down at her bike. Despite Mitzi's taunts, she couldn't help but be a little jealous of her car. But the bike had been a loving present that she cherished. It's true that her family wasn't able to afford a car like Mitzi's, but she'd take the crusty old relic over the hollow car any day. As for UCLA, well, Bloom was more hungry for it than ever now, knowing that she'll never have to see Mitzi's face again when she walks onto campus that first day. Crusty bike and all. Bloom set off and pedaled through the familiar streets of Mill Valley, the warm spring breeze tussling her hair like flames. Nestled amidst the rolling hills of Northern California, where the scent of eucalyptus mingles with the salty breeze of the Pacific, it has a charming boulevard lined with eclectic shops adorned with colourful facades. Quaint boutiques beckon with their unique offerings, from artisanal crafts to vintage treasures. Bloom turned onto the avenue. She spotted the familiar sign of her mother's flower shop, Gardenia. Colourful petals and leaves peeked through the windows. Vanessa had chosen the location strategically, between an up-and-coming bookstore and a coffee shop that perfumed the area with freshly roasted beans. Adopted as a baby by Mike and Vanessa, Bloom found herself in the care of two of the kindest, wisest people one could call their parents. Mike, a local fireman in Mill Valley, was the quintessential high school football captain. Well-liked, well-mannered, and still sporting a great head of hair. His charisma and steady presence made him a beloved husband and father. Bloom and Mike had a boisterous relationship, sharing their love for board games and disdain for modern art. Monopoly was always a rather serious affair in the Peters household. You can't build a hotel on Boardwalk without 4 houses first, Mike would say, a teasing glint in his eye, as Bloom fumed over another lost game. Vanessa, like Mike, was a kindly lady, self-assured and business-savvy. She met Mike in high school, and the pair never looked another way after that. She owned a florist in town called Gardenia, into which she poured her heart and soul. Vanessa loved nothing more than to make someone smile with a large bouquet of flowers. Bloom would often join her mother in the shop. The scent of fresh flowers was comforting like nothing else to her. Vanessa would hum softly as she arranged the petals, her fingers weaving together colours and textures. Bloom trusted her mother's judgments no matter what. She was always there with a warm blanket and cup of hot cocoa to talk about anything, her voice a soothing balm to Bloom's frayed nerves. They'd sit together on the couch, the rain tapping gently against the windows, as Bloom poured over her frustrations and fears. The bond between Bloom and her parents was unshakable, forged through countless shared moments of laughter, love, and quiet understanding. Despite her feelings of mediocrity, in the eyes of Mike and Vanessa, who could not have a child of their own, Bloom was the epitome of extraordinary. Their unwavering belief in her gave Bloom the strength to chase her dreams, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Parking her bike beside the shop's entrance, Bloom pushed open the door, greeted by the familiar melody of the small bell chiming above her. The interior smelled delicately of flowers, sweet and pleasant. "Hey, honey," Vanessa's warm voice floated from behind the bouquets. She appeared from the back room, with hands covered in soil and petals. Vanessa was a tall lady with soft features. She had tanned olive skin and medium-length dark hair. She always wore a plumeria flower behind her left ear, and her signature blue dungarees covered in all sorts of colourful stains. Her brown eyes lit up at the sight of Bloom. "How was school?" she asked. Bloom managed a half-hearted smile, tossing her bag by the counter. "Oh, you know, the standard, Mitzi being her usual self." Vanessa frowned slightly, sensing that Bloom had taken her comments today particularly to heart. "Ignore her, sweetheart. You know she's just, well, Mitzi." She rolled her eyes. I don't know why she does it. She loves to torment me, but it's always veiled underneath this idea that she secretly cares. Does she think we're friends or something, and this is how she treats everyone? Sometimes I'd rather she was pure evil. It'd make her easier to deal with. Well, nobody is pure evil, Bloom. I think Mitzi believes everything to be a competition. You know that. Yeah, I know. She trailed off. Anyway, how's your day been? All fine here. You know, we've got that town fair coming up. Mr. Gennaro has asked if we could do some floral arrangements. Maybe you'd like to help? Bloom giggled. Yes, I'll help. For payment in ice cream, of course, and to help me win against Dad at our next game night. Deal, Vanessa quipped. They shook on it. Not that I don't love your company, but I didn't think you'd be stopping by. I thought you were headed up to Muir today after class. I'm still going to cycle up to do some sketching. I thought I'd stop by in case the email came through on the way. That, and I don't know. I guess I needed someone to get Mitzi out of my head. I also forgot my coat. She looked over to a black raincoat hung up on the door. Bloom took a deep breath and began carefully arranging lilies and roses. Vanessa began alongside her, expertly crafting a bouquet from the flowers. You know, honey, she began, life is full of people like Mitzi. They'll always find something to criticize, but it doesn't define who you are or what you're capable of. You have your own path, your own dreams. UCLA or not, you'll find your way. You know what I always say, people are like flowers. Everyone is different, they bloom at different times, and they are all worthy of love. Bloom smiled and nodded, but winced a little at the idea of rejection from UCLA. She had been checking her inbox every half hour. Thanks, Mum, she smiled. I'ma take off. I need to get there well before daylight's out. Yes, remember to not stay out too late after dark, and to call when you're on your way back. See you later, sweetie. Bloom took her coat from the door, left the shop, hopped on her bike and set on her way to the woods. Despite her parents being the most wonderful, and her teachers being the most supportive, everyone, including herself, knew it and believed it to be true. There was simply nothing extraordinary about Bloom. Except for the fact that she was a fairy. A powerful one, at that, and bloody brilliant with a pencil. She did not know it, of course. Not that she was great with a pencil, although she doubted herself as all good artists do. But a fairy? How could she know such a thing? Fairies aren't real, after all. They're creatures of folklore, as mythical as the stories in Plato's writings. Or so you've been told. What a presumptuous lie. Chapter 2. Bloom cycled up the familiar winding road leading to Muir Woods. The rhythmic click of her bike chain was almost soothing. It was still warm, and the air became fresher as she left the town. There was so much beauty around her, the towering redwoods beckoning in the distance. She had made this journey so many times, but it never grew old. She muttered to herself, pushing harder on the pedals as the terrain inclined. The entrance plaza to Muir Woods stood as a picturesque gateway to the forest. It was a rather quaint entrance plaza, a rustic wooden arch over the main path. The sign, weathered by years of sun and rain, exuded a sense of timelessness. Tall redwood trees bordered the plaza, their forms casting dappled shadows on the ground. A series of wooden benches provided a place for visitors to rest and take in the scenery. Carved into each bench was images of local wildlife, deer, foxes and birds. As she neared the entrance to the park, she spotted Ranger Kelly Jones, standing by the gate, checking passes. Kelly was a short girl in her late 20s, with a friendly demeanour and bright blue eyes. She waved as Bloom approached. Hey Bloom, back for more inspiration? She called out. Hey Cal, you know it, she replied, catching her breath as she locked her bike up on the railings. Kelly checked her pass, a gift from her parents for her birthday last year, and nodded approvingly. Annual pass still good? You know, you're probably our most frequent visitor. What's the sketchbook looking like these days? Bloom grinned and pulled her sketchbook from her bag. Want to take a look? Always, Kelly said, her interest genuine. She flipped through the pages, showing her latest work. There were detailed drawings of the redwoods, delicate sketches of wildflowers, and some more imaginative pieces. One drawing caught Kelly's eye. It depicted a place unlike anything she'd seen, yet so vividly real. Grecian-style buildings leading to a fantastical castle on a hill. She turned the pages to reveal picturesque interiors and golden halls. Where are these from? Kelly said with her mouth open. I'm not sure, actually. I made them up. Kinda European, wouldn't you say? They tilted their heads. I guess they are pretty extravagant, she giggled. The truth was, Bloom had drawn it from a dream, or something. But she'd never admit to that. She liked Kelly, but not that much. This one is incredible, she said, pointing to a drawing of a beautiful woman. Who is she? Bloom shrugged, a bit embarrassed. I'm not really sure. She just came to me. Kelly nodded thoughtfully. You have a real talent, Bloom. Ever thought about doing this professionally? I'd love to, she admitted, but it's tough. That's why I'm hoping to get into UCLA. They have a great art program that I could transfer onto after my first year. Only if something more academic doesn't pique my interest first, that is. I'm sure you'll make it, Kelly said with conviction. Your work speaks for itself. Bloom smiled, appreciating her encouragement. She turned the page, revealing a sketch of a haggard face with sharp features and a malevolent glare. It was a stark contrast to her other, more whimsical drawings. Whoa, who's that? This one's creepy enough to give me nightmares, Kelly said, raising an eyebrow. I couldn't tell you either. Characters I make up in my head, I guess, Bloom said, frowning slightly. Sometimes I just feel this urge to draw something, and that's where my best work comes from, flying by the seat of my pants. She studied the drawings for a moment before nodding. Well, it's powerful. Shows you have range. I'm not an expert or anything, but you've got a special talent. Really? You think that? Bloom beamed. Thanks, Cal. That means a lot. Anyways, I'm heading in. I'll see you later. Remember, the park shuts at 8. I don't want a repeat of last month. That was one time. Besides, I won't end up staying long tonight. There's no signal in the woods. Ah, of course. Have fun. She tucked the sketchbook back into her bag and said goodbye. The conversation had been a nice distraction and a welcome boost to her self-esteem. Bloom began her walk to find a calm place to sketch. Her mind wandered. The forest had always been a place of solace for her, a place where she could lose herself in her art and dreams. The conversation with Kelly had her considering if she really was good enough to do art professionally. Even though she bolstered to Mitzi, Bloom always saw art as an escape rather than a career. But maybe she could have both. Her plan was to study something lucrative at UCLA, something where she could make a difference. All the schools she had applied to had decent history programs. She wasn't overly fussed about what she studied, alarmingly so. She sometimes wondered, did she want this life for herself at all? Or was she chasing the idea, rather than the reality, of what it is to feel fulfilled? A couple of hours went by and Bloom found herself in a quaint part of the woods, quiet and alone. The air was saturated with the earthly perfume of damp soil and the sweet scent of sequoia. She found herself observing a Douglas squirrel, capturing its form with several strokes of the pencil as it gathered food for the night. Her sketchbook often featured the majestic stature of the tall redwood trees and the diverse flora and fauna of the woods. Yesterday, she had spotted a proud Cooper hawk, and the day before, a bathing salamander, each rendered in different mediums on the pages of her worn sketchbook. At this hour, the sunlight filtered through the leaves and created a magical interplay of shadows on the forest floor. They danced with each gentle sway of the canopy overhead. She would never tire of the enchanting woodland scenes that the forest revealed to her during each visit. Bloom continued her portrait of the squirrel, propped up against one of the trees in the quiet corner of the woods. The tranquility was only interrupted by the rustling leaves and the occasional chirping of birds high in the canopy. Home wasn't a stressful environment for Bloom. Her parents were always happy to help her take her mind off things, but she knew they were as worried as she was. Sometimes it was easier to be alone with her own thoughts. Bloom extended her sketchbook at arm's length, carefully examining her handiwork. Her eyes darted between the squirrel, still scurrying about on the woodland floor, and her drawing. The creature's form was perfect, resembling the outline of a photograph, but something was missing. She paused, then rummaged through her bag, retrieving a battered and stained box of pastels. Inside, the pastels were broken into several pieces and stored randomly. They worked just as well like this. She didn't see much point being precious with her supplies. She began to render the fur on the creature, using layers of grey and brown. Studying the colours of the rodent, she noticed it stood on its hind legs and locked eyes with her for a moment. She glanced up, then fixed her gaze back upon the squirrel. What was once a calm creature now seemed panicked. It retreated up a sequoia tree, blending into the reddish-brown camouflage of the wood. Bloom sat bewildered and irritated with herself. She would usually take a picture on her phone, but today it had slipped her mind, leaving her without a reference and an unfinished drawing. "You're kidding," she muttered under her breath, before redirecting her attention to her sketchbook, going back and forth in her mind whether she should continue from memory or pull up a reference at home. Either way, it had soured her mood. The atmosphere beneath the canopy had grown markedly dim as dusk settled in, casting a shadow over the wood. She assumed there weren't many people left in the park, which, admittedly, was how Bloom liked it. The kiss of the sun had gone, and a gentle chill permeated the air. The once melodic chirping of birds that punctuated the soundscape had vanished, leaving only the eerie howling of the wind. Bloom stood up and brushed the eraser shavings from her jeans and retrieved the coat she was sat on, shaking it to dislodge any dirt before tying it around her waist. It would soon be time for the park to close anyway, and she could have 20 unseen texts from her mum and an important email in her inbox that won't reach her until she leaves the cover of the forest. Closing her sketchbook, she stashed it into her bag alongside her pencils and pastels. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being observed. The fine hairs on the nape of her neck stood on end. If she focused, she could almost hear another creature's breath in tandem with hers. It was a deep, unsettling feeling. There aren't any bears in Muir, but she wasn't about to try her luck against a mountain lion or a coyote either. Her bike wasn't parked far, so she began wandering back to the entrance. As she took her first step, from behind her, there was a sudden snap of a branch. It cracked like a whip. She spun to face the sound, narrowing her eyes to scan the surrounding trees and bushes. The dimness had deepened, with the last rays of dusk filtering through the leaves of the canopy. The chilling sensation intensified, as if she was staring right back at something or someone. "Hello?" Bloom called out, moreover to hear the comforting sound of her own voice than expecting a reply. Feeling her own heavy breathing, she took a moment to compose herself, closing her eyes and inhaling deeply. The stress of the day had got into her head, she mused. How wrong she was. As she managed to regain her composure, a creature emerged from the shadows, unlike anything she had ever seen. It ascended from the ground, growing taller with each passing moment, casting a looming shadow over her. As its features began to materialize, it revealed an eyeless face, marked by a wide, uncanny, and sharp smile, with 2 slits for a nose. The head, almost human but bold, pale grey and veiny, led to a body even more alien. Pointed limbs resembling spears, a dried blood-coloured exterior, and organs encased in what looked like a roach's shell. The creature emitted the putrid odour of rotting flesh, and its growl had an infected and mucosal sound. Bloom stood paralysed with fear and sheer shock. The creature purred, sniffing the air, inching closer to where she stood. "My God," she said under her breath. It continued to sniff the air until it finally caught scent of her. The creature shrieked. In a flash, Bloom was running faster than ever before, the foliage rustling beneath her feet. Panting, stumbling, the same air that once brought her comfort now became an obstacle to wade through. The creature followed suit. It was faster than she was, but far more clumsy. It crashed into the redwood trees as it stabbed its limbs into the ground. She couldn't look back now. She couldn't. She needed to make it to the entrance and out of the woods. Would it follow her back to town? To her house? What about her parents? The creature bellowed in frustration from behind her. She spotted a clearing ahead and ran into the open glade, the canopy above opening up to the evening sky. But she didn't recognize this part of the woods. She tried to look around for the best way out, but was completely disoriented. She went to run again but tripped on something at her feet and fell brutally to the ground. She could hear the creature behind her. This wasn't real. Surely this must be a dream. She sobbed and looked again at the creature, then back to the ground. This was it. She was going to die. "You know, the evening light does wonders for the complexion, darling. I'm so glad you decided to join me out here." A voice spoke from behind Bloom, still staring at the ground blankly. She pushed back her hair and rolled over. The creature was at the centre of the glade, but between them was a girl with long golden blonde hair. Tendrils of warm, holographic light seemed to orbit her body. She stood tall, statuesque and confident. "Are you okay?" she asked Bloom. turning to face her. Bloom nodded, captivated by one of the most beautiful girls she had ever seen. With slightly wide-set amber brown eyes, light gold tanned skin, and a cheeky smile, the girl wore an orange and yellow robe over a scaled, shimmering jumpsuit. As she turned to face the creature again, Bloom noticed a small pair of translucent, holographic wings attached to her back. Impossible. The girl shot spectral spears from the orbiting tendrils around her. Each spear hit the creature, dissolving into its body. It roared and charged back at the girl. She weaved behind it and blasted it back with light. Who was this girl? Then, with a leap into the sky, she fired a concentrated beam of heat at the creature's path. It winced but swatted the girl like a fly. She fell to the ground and rolled into a cloud of dust. Bloom watched as the creature began to sniff again. Bloom panicked as she tried to get up. Her leg twisted beneath her. She couldn't move from her helpless position on the glade floor. Desperate, she tried to claw her way back to the tree line in a bid to hide from the monster, but it was tens of meters away. At first, it began to stalk toward the girl, but it sniffed again and set its sights back onto Bloom. It drooled from the mouth, the eyeless face of the grotesque creature fixated on her. Suddenly, a strong breeze came from her left. It was the blonde girl. The wind picked up, and the creature sniffed again, following the direction of the wind into the trees. It squealed and ran into the forest. Paralyzed in shock, Bloom couldn't move as the blonde girl ran towards her. "Are you hurt?" she cried as she ran. "You're fortunate I arrived when I did." She extended a hand to lift Bloom from the ground. "The creature is still out there. We need to put as much distance between us and it as possible." She looked to where the creature ran to, her wings vanishing into nothing. "Who are you?" Bloom gasped, her eyes wide in a state of shock. "My name is Stella. Listen, I can answer your questions later, but the creature can smell magic, so if you intend to stay here, be my guest. What's your name?" "Bloom," she responded, grasping the severity of the situation. "I'm pretty sure the exit is that way." "Okay, great. Let me help you." Stella put Bloom's arm around her shoulder. They both hurried in the direction of the exit. They walked quickly. Bloom's injured leg improved with each step. Whether due to adrenaline or not remained uncertain. Both girls remained silent, left to process the events that transpired, each checking their surroundings in case the creature had decided to follow them. They weren't far from the park gate, managing to get out within minutes. The place was deserted. Upon reaching the main plaza, Bloom went to unlock her bike. Stella looked around before noticing what Bloom was doing. "How are you going to cycle home with your leg?" Stella asked, breaking the silence. Bloom continued to unlock her bike before finally meeting Stella's gaze. "Can I call anyone for you? If not, I'm going to go." "Alone?" Stella yelled. "Do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" "No, and I don't want to know. Whatever is happening here, I don't want anything to do with it." Bloom began putting on her helmet and swung her leg over her bike. "Monsters in the woods. I must be losing my mind." Stella's face was riddled with confusion. "Listen, Belinda. It's Bloom. Whatever. Perhaps you didn't hear me earlier. That creature can smell magic." "Magic?" Bloom said under her breath. "Yes, magic." Stella theatrically waved her hands. "Did you not see what I did? It was after you and I saved your life." "So? So? How come it was more interested in you than it was in me?" Stella's eyes locked with Bloom's, her tone cold but serious. Despite witnessing these extraordinary events, every sense in Bloom's head screamed that this girl was crazy. "Oh, I get it. This is some sort of joke." "Real funny, Mitzi," Bloom screamed into the trees. "Keep your voice down. This isn't a joke. You know what you saw, Billy. It's Bloom. Belinda, Billy, Bella, whatever. It doesn't matter. You're in danger and I can help you." Stella extended her hand, her voice cracked. "And I kinda need a friend as well." In that moment, Bloom allowed herself to believe in something extraordinary. But she had spent too long living in a world of normalcy to believe it. "Listen, Stella, I can't deal with this right now. I choose the blue pill. Even if there is something real about this, you should go to the police. Or the rangers, they can help you get home. But please, stay away from me." Bloom pushed her bike down the hill, beginning her journey home. Bloom, please wait, don't leave. You're in danger!